Amy?
I can.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for another edition of New England Chapter Connects. This past Sunday was officially the first day of spring, and many of our Public Works colleagues are getting ready for their projects to get them underway, winter cleanups, road improvement projects, new water mains, all types of activities. And with many of them, you will be dealing with your customers, the public. We have a very timely public works awareness topic today, dealing with the public. And we have an exceptional panel of municipal and state leaders and public engagement specialists that will provide you with some ideas on how to effectively engage with the public, de-escalate those uncomfortable interactions, and ways to create a positive experience for the customer and yourself. My name is Rich Benevento. I am the New England Chapter National Delegate to the Council of Chapters and the co-chair of the Public Works Awareness Committee. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's New England Chapter Connect session. In addition to our New England Chapter states, we have quite a group of participants from around the country, so welcome all of them. I think we have people from California and Colorado and Texas and Wisconsin and North Carolina, so welcome. Glad to have you with us. Just a couple of things before we get started. First, many thanks to our Public Works Awareness Committee doing great work to promote the value and importance of public works in our communities and in our lives. It's a great group doing real work to promote public works. There has also been some very valuable collaboration with the New England Chapter Education Committee, working together to bring topics that are interesting, informative, and really beneficial for our members. So we want to thank our Education Committee as well. The Public Works Awareness Committee continues to grow. That said, we're always looking for new members. So if you're interested in getting involved with the committee, please either reach out to me, Julie Pansantini in Brookline, or send Regina an email or text message, and she can at the T2 Center, and she can get you in contact with us. I'd also like to invite any of our Public Works colleagues from outside of New England. Many are on the call today. To come and join us as well. It's always very informative. You can learn about what the Public Works Awareness Committee is doing to promote public works. So we'd love to have you. That said, a big shout out to our New England Chapter Connects producer, Regina Hackett, and the entire team at the Connecticut T2 Center. They do amazing work producing our program every month. And we want to thank them for that. They've been doing a great job. We couldn't do it without them. And of course, a special thanks to our sponsors, to the APWA New England Chapter sponsors. Without the support of our sponsors, we could not bring all of the valuable programs and events to our members in the public works community. And with things getting back to normal, whatever that is, the New England Chapter has a full slate of events, starting with our spring conference on April 20th, our Administrative Professionals Workshop on April 27th, the Vermont Municipal Equipment Show on May 11th, our National Public Works Week Luncheon on May 18th, and of course, our 3-day summer conference in June 15th, 16th, and 17th. All of these events are helped, made possible because of the generous support of our sponsors. The continued support of the chapter and our public works community is so very important. So we thank them, and we hope that you will thank them as well. The New England Chapter Connects program was created to keep us all connected and informed while we were isolated during COVID. We hope that you will find that the New England Chapter Connects series is worthwhile and helps you stay informed and stay connected. We have an exciting New England Chapter Connects program calendar for this year, including our session on April 28th, recruiting and retention. A very important topic, something we are all dealing with. So be sure to tune in for that. And you can see the other programs that are up there, May, September, October, November. So certainly tune in for those. They're great topics, and I think you'll get a lot out of them. Also, if you miss any of our sessions and you would like to replay them, the sessions for your staff, all of our New England Chapter Connect sessions can be found on the New England Chapter website. You can also find a lot of information if you're interested in becoming a sponsor or a member. And again, all of this information can be found at the chapter website, newengland.apwa.net. So let's get right at it. I'd like to introduce our panel for today. Laura Francis is the first select woman from the town of Durham, Connecticut. She's also the president of the Connecticut Council of Small Towns. We also have Catherine Otto, planning coordinator for the Vermont Agency of Transportation, doing a lot of work up there with Vermont DOT. Sean Dugan, public information officer for the town of Lexington, Mass. Lorene Beatty, office manager for the Department of Public Works for the town of Milford, Connecticut. And of course, our moderator today, Nancy Farrell. Nancy is the CEO of Regina Viller Associates. They are a public engagement firm and a public relations firm. So we have a fantastic panel. We hope that you'll get a lot out of it. I'm sure you will. So with that, I would like to welcome the panel and welcome Nancy. Good morning.
Hey, Rich. Good morning. Thank you. Great to be here. It's more like a fall day here in New England. As you know, if you're with me, it's cold and rainy, but my daffodils are getting ready to bloom. So that's exciting. And I'm really excited to be here. I'm usually the person behind a podium or writing a website or something like that. And I can't tell you how much I've learned from folks like you and the jobs you have and the departments you run, because that's how I communicate information to the public. You're on the front line, though. I'm usually a little hidden. So it's a pleasure to be with you today and talk about the kinds of issues that you run into. Now, we hope that most of the time your interactions with the public are positive. But we know in the world that we live in today, things aren't always positive, and that people tend sometimes to be hostile, to dig in, to not believe what they're hearing in the public sector. And that's really unfortunate. And unfortunately, again, a lot of people feed on that kind of activity, let's say. It's really not particularly helpful. And I have to say that in the Zoom world, my life has changed a lot as someone who moderates a lot of public meetings. I usually had the good fortune when I was in person with people not to feel a lot of hostility. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite stories is that on a project I was on for many years, there was a community that was very opposed to the project, and a gentleman would get up at every meeting and tell us why the project was terrible and what was bad about it. And I would write a summary of what he had said. And then he would come to the next meeting and read my summary because he liked it better than what he had said. So we eventually got to be friends. And I think it's stories like that that give you a sense that even someone who is really uncomfortable or opposed to what you're doing, to the service that you provide, can be brought over to the other side. So anyway, I think of him often and hope he's well and healthy and still being an advocate for what he cares about. So you all sent us some questions and suggestions about what you're interested in hearing today. And so we're going to be very casual about this and use describe to you some of the practices that we use. If you have specific questions as we go along, as Regina said, you can put them in the chat. And if at some point, you know, it would be easier to talk to one of us, please send Regina a note afterwards, and we'd be happy, I think, to follow up and share some experiences. So the first issue that we're going to address is if our moderators can talk about whether they train their staff for dealing with the public or offer training opportunities for conflict resolution. Now, this is not necessarily in the scope of every DPW, but I wonder if any of my colleagues can comment on that at this point. Pretty quiet out
Nancy,
there.
Nancy,
Yeah.
I can start.
There you are, Laura. Hi.
So I'm going to give you a little backdrop of probably all of my comments today, and that is there needs to be a very strong partnership between the CEO of the town and not just the department head of DPW, but all of the line staff as well. And so I would say that, and that partnership goes both ways. First and foremost, the CEO has to understand and appreciate the job, every single job that DPW does. You have to start learning the language they speak. You have to demonstrate that you know what the job entails. You have to demonstrate that you know what the overarching laws, statutes, best practices are that you expect them to do. In exchange, they need to know what the CEO's parameters are, what their pressures are, budgeting, all of that. Once that is established, I think that on-the-job training is probably the best way. And I say that because their job is so labor intensive and there's never enough time in the day. It's hard to get them to go to a class, like a public relations class, or even a webinar from a established PIO like Sean. And so what I like to do with them is have regular meetings with them where we have interchange. I invite them to talk to our residents together. I encourage them to never be alone when they're in one-on-one with the public. And so they've created their own little teams where they will go and talk. And I often go with them when it's time to talk to, and we encourage. Now Zoom is so nice because my director, my foreman will say, well, we'll set up a meeting and we can talk about that. And they're often very surprised that I end up on that conversation, because one thing that residents want to always do is talk to the next person in charge when they don't get the answer that they like. But for me to be on that conversation early on, they almost accept the fact that there's nowhere else to go. And so what I have found is, because I've engaged the public with them, they're learning how to speak like me and I'm learning how to speak like them. And that's been very helpful.
So Laura, it sounds like it is your own kind of training program, right? It's different. It's knowing your employees, supporting them, making sure they're not alone, and really connecting on a level that makes dealing with the public much easier. Laureen, it looks like you have something to say.
I do. I want to agree with what Laura had mentioned and just add a personal twist to it. With my years of experience, we unfortunately had to fill my frontline person unexpectedly 4 years ago. So she really jumped in here with not a lot of knowledge. So to be side by side with her and give her my experience of sound confident on the phone. You know, that's half the battle. Smile when you answer the phone. People can see that and hear that. And I also told her, go out with the guys. You need to learn the vocabulary, like Laura said, and just provide that. Here, we're chip sealing. Go out, look. So when you can talk knowledgeably to the customer, that's half the battle. It's knowing what to say and sounding confident. And like Laura said, we have a few chains up before we get to our mayor. But the fact that I'm her supervisor, I always make sure, I've made sure that she knows that I will support her 100%. And that's key, that she knows she can turn to me and say, can you handle this? I'm not sure what the answer is. Or if she's right and they want to escalate it, if I decide for some reason to disagree with what she had said, she's right, and I will let the person know that she was right in her answer, but I can make a different decision. I did the same thing for years at managing Toys R Us, and can I tell you, at Christmas there is a lot of grumpy people. So being supportive is yeah, a lot of the battle.
That's great. That's great. Sean, you've been nodding. You want to jump in there? Yeah.
Nancy, really quick, we did have a question, and I don't even know if this is a good spot for it, but how do you deal with CEOs who text or call directly with constituents all the time?
So in essence, they're going around the staff person who's dealing with the issue, right?
Yeah, that's what I believe they're asking.
Like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Laureen, do you have you run into that, or is it just something you should never be done?
All the time. The mayor has his own Facebook page. We have our Facebook page. He shares it. He tries to refer it back to the department when he can, but he's also a politician. So he's trying to please, and there's a lot of us that talk to him directly weekly and just remind him that you can't always say yes. No is a complete sentence. You know, we can't go on private property. We, you know, don't make promises that we can't cash. So it's just having good communication with them.
Yep, I'll add on to that, to Lorraine's point. That's exactly what I was going to say, is making sure that your executive office, your town manager, your mayor has an open line of communication with DPW, and it's a two-way street, making sure that DPW knows that if there is going to be an anticipated issue, that the town manager knows about it, so then he can anticipate those calls. Because my role right now is in the town manager's office, so we often are the people that get elevated to, they go immediately to us versus going to DPW first, because they think they're going to get a different answer if they talk to us first. But if we have that open line of communication between the department and with our office, we're going to know exactly how to answer those questions, and be able to be supportive of each other. And like Lorraine said, be able to say no when we have to say no, because we can't just miraculously change course on a project just because one person happens to be speaking loudly enough that it's caught the ear of the town manager. So it's having that supportive relationship is really key, and making sure that the town manager's office is able to communicate with DPW and letting them know what they're hearing on the street, and vice versa, to be able to be cooperative and field those questions and sound knowledgeably when you're answering them.
So it sounds like if there's communication, it's a good situation. But if there's someone who's not really prepared or checking in with your department, then it can become problematic. And I've worked in cities and towns where a city councilor could go rogue and be off, you know, not actually be supporting the DPW, and then that gets complicated. Yes, Sean?
Yes, it does. And actually, I responded to a reporter. A reporter reached out to me a couple of weeks ago, asking about this for a story that she was doing. The city council in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, there was an issue where the city councilors were reaching out directly to staff members, not just in DPW, but in any town department or city department. And in some cases, it was counter to what the mayor was directing them to do. But the mayor, as the chief executive of the community, is the one that's directing the day-to-day operations of the city or town. And so when you have two competing elected officials telling you two different things, then it becomes really complicated and puts staff in a really difficult position. So our recommendation is always to go through the executive office to make sure that they're the ones that are in charge and know what's happening. And so if they're getting requests from other elected officials or residents, that it goes through and we have a consistent response each time we get reached out to about a specific project or issue.
Yeah, the consistency is really important. And Catherine, you were going to tell us how you prepare in these situations.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is getting a good feel for like what might be coming up. So having like that cheat sheet, kind of like, okay, I expect X, Y, and Z issues to come up, like get prepared and bring in partners. So you may not need to be the one who's the face of this. Make sure everyone's clear on like, okay, we're rolling out this project. This person's going to be the main contact, funnel everything to them. But then also strategize, like, we know this is like, you know, certain questions are always going to come up with the paving projects. Like, why are you closing this street? Why are you doing it this dumb time? Like, those questions come up every time. Have like that quick response that you can get. I think that's really important. And find another thing, I think that Laura was mentioning about those strong relationships and being able to say yes. Another thing is try to find those compromises. There are times you say, I hear what you're saying. We may not be able to address it now, but I'm going to write this down. And when we do the next project, we'll definitely consider that when we're trying to work out like, what are the logistics? So sometimes you can kind of almost take a problem and say, I totally acknowledge it's definitely true. Let us consider it for next time. And I think that's some of the thing that I've had to do is like, I can't prevent what happened this time or even last time, but I can try and do better. So that's kind of how I try and think about the future. And my role is less like on the front line. I don't get those phone calls straight away, but I'm doing meetings to prepare and plan for these projects. And I know I will hear someone saying, I don't want those trucks going here. That's just as important. So.
Nancy, we actually have a hand up for a question, and Paula, you can unmute.
Thank you. It's actually not a question. I agree with Laura like 1,000%. I've only been in office just shy of 3 years, and one of the first things I did was make a relationship with my Public Works department, because they are paramount to the workings of this town. I only have, well, right now I'm down to 6 guys in my department. So needless to say, it is always all hands on deck, no matter what's happening. And the thing is, a lot of times people will reach out to me directly and I will just answer them very politely by saying, you know what, I'm not sure. Let me reach out to my department head and either I or he will get back to you and follow up. I never give a direct answer because most of the time I probably don't know, the perfect answer for them as much as they think they're going to get what they want. And one of the key things I like to do is randomly, we keep talking about issues popping up and how to deal with all the problems. What I try to also do is just randomly show up at the department in the morning when they're opening up and I'll come walking in with a box of Munchkin donuts for them for the day and just sort of set the tone, check in with them, see what's going on, any issues they have. Just trying to keep a constant open communication with them so that they don't feel like they're being forgotten. And like I say, with such a small handful of guys, you have to kind of keep everybody on the same page and working as a team, because all it takes is one, I don't want to say bad apple or grumpy person in the department, and it just could be like a virus and it just sets a bad tone. So it's important to kind of keep them all engaged and on the same page. And because I tell them, I say, I know what it's like to deal with the public. I get the good, the bad, the ugly. As CEOs, we all get it. We know what it's like to deal with the public. And we can't always give them what they want, but we can sort of ease the way we answer them and deal with it. I had a gentleman who got his front step knocked out by the plow. And, he was getting a little testy and everything was frozen up here in Bethany. It was like a, crystal castle. And I kept telling him, we will fix it for you, but we need to know when the conditions are right to properly take care of it. And he was complaining that his wife was 8 months pregnant and couldn't go out and get the mail. And I felt like saying, well, you're one heck of a guy to make sure your wife is going out in the middle of a snowstorm at 8 months pregnant to go get the mail. I mean, so let's get logical and a little common sense. So we did. I got an email from him at like 1 o'clock in the morning the other day saying, thank you for coming back and fixing it. And, like I say, they have to understand that it's not going to be done immediately a lot of times either. So it's a constant balance of what you can do, when you can do it, but also, like I said, initially, keeping an open communication with your department, even when there aren't issues being had, just showing up to say what's going on, and but like I say, I agree 1,000% with what everything Laura said.
All right, Laura, you hit it out of the park there for sure. Thank you, Paula. I want to go on to the next question because I know this happens sometimes that we all face an increasingly angry resident on the phone or in person. And, is there any time when it's appropriate either to hang up or to walk away from that person? Or could we share some tips about how to deal with those situations? And Laureen, you had some good suggestions when we talked earlier this week.
There's absolutely times that you can hang up, and I've absolutely, my frontline person knows that. We do not accept swearing. We do not accept yelling. She will politely ask them first to stop yelling or to, stop swearing. And if they do not, absolutely hang up. I'm hanging up now. Call back when you're, can talk I'm a professional, talk in a professional manner. So that's one. My other tip I learned a long time ago, especially when you're face to face, is my voice gets lower and softer. So they eventually have to stop yelling or lower their voice in order to hear me speak. So I'll start out at my normal voice and they'll keep going, and then my voice will just drop a little bit more and just a little bit more, and eventually they catch on. So it's a technique that helps dispel a lot of the tension, especially if you're listening. If you're trying to listen, but your voice gets lower because they're still yelling at you, it works.
Nancy?
I agree, yes. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
So one of the ways, if it's a phone call and there's someone that's just coming at you, one thing that we have done that has nicely de-escalated that call at that time is say, Would you like to meet in person? Would you like us to come out and see? So that does a couple of things. It gives us a chance to like think about how we might respond. It also shows the person on the phone, okay, well, they're gonna pay attention to me. But my favorite story, and it seems to work nicely, but one of my favorite stories of one time that this happened is the man says, well, oh, you could come out here, but I'm only available at 5:30 in the morning because I work, 12 hours a day. And I said, all right, we'll come out at 5:30 in the morning. So it was winter time. It was, very dark, and my foreman and I were there at 5:30 in the morning. He didn't know I was coming, so he was a little taken back. So that disarmed him. We walked around the cul-de-sac. We talked about what plow trucks do and how they do it. I told him I've actually driven in a plow truck, and we actually came to a solution that he participated in. Like someone said earlier, if you could have everybody win a little bit, and maybe everybody doesn't get what they want a little bit, you can kind of de-escalate a situation. So that's been helpful in our little town.
I think building off what you just said, Laura, like what you're talking about is also correcting misinformation. So sometimes you need to correct it, and you're like, okay, I'm here, you're saying this, but this is how I understand, this is how this is going to roll out, if you're part of that conversation. So correcting information, but another way to do it is to make sure that, like, over time, our agency has been far more, like, I've been on the outside of our agency working with it. And what I loved is that over time, they were sharing more and more information. So instead of having people being frustrated because I don't understand why you're doing this, it doesn't make sense, and I can't see how everything's juggling and why you made this a priority over this, instead, at their own leisure, they could explore the information. Okay, this is how this is working out over time. We have a portal called V-Transparency. And sometimes that's the issue is, like, there's a bunch of misunderstanding, plus there's frustration, and I can't understand, and I can't get my head around it. So stepping back and, like, how do I, like, explain this process? How do I get ahead of it? And it may not help this time. As I said, like, it may be the next opportunity you have. But I love the way you phrase that, Laura, about going out there and saying, I've sat in this plow truck, and unfortunately we can't necessarily do exactly that, but I can offer this instead, and find that compromise in the middle. So.
Hey, Sean, do you want to throw something in there?
Sure. I was just going to say that some piggybacking off of what Laura had said. I mean, after 10 years personally in public life, both as I've been an elected official as well as being in as my career, is that pretty much 9 times out of 10, people just want to be listened to. So if you give them the space to be able to just talk and talk and talk, and you just sit back and like Lorraine had said, you get softer as they get louder. The more that they say, you just kind of don't respond when they want to get a rise out of you to say a certain thing. And if you just keep listening and listening and listening, and they just keep rambling and rambling and rambling, eventually they're going to get it out. And then you can interject with the educational or informational piece. But people 9 times out of 10 just want to be able to air their grievance with you, whether or not you can actually fix it. But they've at least been heard at that point. And if you hit them with compassion versus anger, then they're going to be much more likely to leave satisfied.
And sometimes dive in further. Like, if they're saying, this is what's going on, like, can you explain it more? Can you help me understand where you're coming from? Because that's saying you're listening and you want to know more. It's not saying I'm shutting you down. I'm saying, no, I've just got to have my ears open. I want to understand. And that's really important.
Yeah, an example of that we get all the time, I'm sure everybody's heard, is the phone call of, your plow truck went past my house at 80 miles an hour. And we know it's exaggeration, but all our trucks are GPSed, and I can pull up right there and give them the exact speed and explain to them that because it's such a big truck and it's so loud, it sounds way faster than it's going. And by the way, they really can't plow at that speed.
Right.
But it's giving them the proof that, no, actually you're wrong, correcting them with the facts while still listening to them. I understand it sounds fast, but it's really not. And then if we find out that they actually were going faster than they should have, maybe 35, 40, depending upon what they were doing, then we can actually say, yeah, we'll talk to the driver. Maybe he needs to slow down at that point.
Regina, did you want to say something? Oh, okay.
I apologize.
so
I didn't know my mute. I did not know my, sorry,
Okay.
my.
You weren't muted, huh?
You know, the other way to build some trust with your department staff is, you know, let's face it, we all make mistakes. Sometimes we all have bad days sometimes. So sometimes, you know, a reaction isn't what you may want it to be all the time. But I think it's important for the CEOs on the line to remember that, you know, you could maybe admit that a mistake was made, but try to not pin it on your people. Why don't you, you know, and said, you know, we're sorry that this happened. We know we could have done better. Thank you for bringing this to my attention. This is something I could address in the next training session that we have. And so that you know, the public knows that this isn't you know, systemic in your department, that this was perhaps just a bad day.
Yeah, I mean, Neil Harry Truman's statement, "The buck stops here," is really important in terms of supporting your staff. And that's actually where we were going in our next question. How do you support your frontline staff and let them know you have their backs, particularly after difficult conversations? And Sean mentioned that 9 out of 10 people are going to just want to hear an answer and be heard. And then there's the 10th person who occasionally is really difficult and yells and doesn't want to stop yelling. And I think in those circumstances, you still have to follow, you know, my guideline would be you still follow the same protocol. You listen, you repeat back to that person. So I understand this is what you're concerned about. And is there anything else I should know about it? And I can't particularly solve that right here. I have to go back and talk to my crew or my staff or whatever, and we will get back to you. And that transparency that Laura and Laureen are talking, that everyone's talking about really, is important, because even if you don't get the 100% right answer back, you've gotten an answer. And that even that stubborn, difficult person, you may come back to again, but I think there's a good possibility that you've made a little bit of progress. And with the stubborn and difficult person, bring somebody else with you. Don't go by yourself. Have a colleague come with you. You want someone to listen. So if this rude person calls up and says, "You were really rude to me," and you were doing your best listening, you've got someone who said, "That's not really what happened." So those are just a few tips that I would share in terms of really dealing with the difficult people. Anyone else want to jump in on that before we move?
I can actually say at a couple of times where I've answered the phone, talked to the person, they weren't happy, they called back. They don't pay attention to how you answer the phone. I always answer it with Public Works, Lorraine speaking. And I've answered it again, and they've gone on to bash me to me. Which actually gives me a good, you know, backup of, no, I heard what she said, and that's not exactly what happened. So they will lie. You know, I'm going to call the mayor. We'll go ahead, but feel free to give him your version first of how you were yelling at me. Yes. And what wouldn't, you know, talk or listen or was swearing. So that you have to realize there are two sides to everything, and that they will try whatever they can to get what they want. And it's gotten worse lately, I think. They will yeah. flat out lie and think that that's okay.
Yeah.
One of the ways to support your staff is to be consistent, right? So if no is no for one person, make sure no is no for everyone. Don't make no a yes for your friends. And my frontline people, when I came into office 15 years ago, that wasn't necessarily the case. And it was very frustrating for them because they were sent out to do special favors all the time. Not only was that disruptive to their, you know, daily work plans, but it sent wrong messages. So I think consistency and how you deal with things, whether you follow the MUTCD and you do not vary, you follow best practices and you do not vary. And if you find that any one of your past practices needs to be changed, you know, make sure you do that collaboratively and adjust. That's one of the best ways that I support my staff. I do not ask them to do anything that doesn't vary from their best practices that would go against their training, that you can't send them for training and have them learn how to do things, you know, in the best way, and then ask them to vary from that.
So you're actually saying there's a balance, there's transparency with the public, but there's also transparency with the staff, with you know, and being fair and honest with staff as well. And if that's not happening, you know, in the department where you work, maybe you have to find some way to talk to somebody about making it happen. That's not always very easy. Fortunately, I don't do HR, but yeah, I think that's really important. And as someone who runs a small company, it's really important to me that people can come to me and say what their problems are and, you know, how we can jointly resolve them. So I think that's true in every situation. So that's a great suggestion, Laura. Thank you. I wanted to move on a little bit to the media topic because we did get some questions about that. And I know it's one of those, it can actually be a wonder or a thorn working with the media. And Sean, I thought maybe I'd ask you to start off this part of the conversation since this is in your lane.
Sure. We don't get a lot of calls from the press in my current role about public works. Knock on wood. I mean, we've had some difficult conversations. We recently had an officer involved shooting in Lexington, and so you get that initial sense of panic when you get a call from the press. And I know that that's the feeling for most folks that don't work in media relations, to think, oh no, the newspaper is calling, they're going to say something bad. And so my advice always is to not panic when the press calls, because it's not always a bad thing. And in being able to set the narrative, it starts with you being able to answer the phone in the first place. So don't panic when the press calls right off the bat, because that sets a negative tone for how the rest of the interaction will go. And second off, don't ignore them. Ignoring the media is never a good frame of action. It's never, and it's also an opportunity, a missed opportunity if you aren't able to set the narrative. If there is a story that's coming out and you're not able to contribute to it meaningfully, then that's giving the press the ability to be able to go off of the information they have available to them without you being able to weigh in on it and be able to correct misinformation. So it's important not to ignore them, because you miss that opportunity to inform and educate and control the narrative. And they're not the bad guys. They're just doing their job as journalists. Information that's tipped off to them, they have a journalistic duty to be able to report on that for the betterment of the community. So they're just doing their job by calling you to get your perspective on it. And many of them work on deadlines. And so being respectful of that is always important. But if they're asking you at 3 o'clock on a Thursday, hey, my deadline is at noon on Friday, being realistic that you can't meet that is understandable. So don't be afraid, and don't feel like you have to rush and hodgepodge something to just get them an answer when it might not be complete and truthful, without getting the firsthand account of what you need, the information that you need to be correct. So don't feel like if a deadline, don't feel pressured if it's an unrealistic deadline. And then one of the cardinal rules of media relations is to never say no comment. So if there is there's never a scenario where you just say no comment. I know that's like an easy way to respond to something, but saying no comment is an automatic admission of guilt. So it's usually best to reframe it in a way that that is more advantageous for you. Even if it doesn't look good, there's a better way to say it than to just say no comment. And then depending on the organization structure, everyone has a chief executive, like Laura had said, and that's where that relationship between the chief executive and the department really comes into play. Being able to know what the chief executive might be hearing from the media, there needs to be a conversation between the two to know, can the department head of DPW respond to media requests on their own? And if that relationship's there, then that's fine. But in reality, everyone should be going through the chief executive's office to make sure that it's consistent with everything else that the town or city is saying. Because if you respond to a media request about this construction project, and actually the mayor or the town manager or the city manager has a different account of things, then that just looks counterproductive, and it looks like we don't have all of our ducks in a row. So just making sure that good relationship's there, and knowing to reach out to them to let them know that you're getting calls is probably the best approach. So I know I just threw a lot at you, but I'm not sure if any of my colleagues have anything to add on to that.
I
Well-
find sometimes, Sean, that just Laura for a second, is that sometimes what happens is someone from the press is asking someone who isn't experienced with the press a question, and they say, well, I think you'll have to go to the office to answer that question or something like that. And the media person keeps pressing because that person sometimes has, a storyline. And it's hard to be the person who says, gosh, I can't answer that question, because you have an opinion about the answer to that question, but your advice is good. Don't answer the question. Don't say no comment. Just pass it on carefully. Is that, Laura, were you going there?
Well, so media has changed over the years. I've been doing this for 15 years and 15 years prior to that in another office. And it used to be that the media covered your meetings and covered your beat. The town hall was part of their beat. Largely now, it's a relationship that you push more information to them than they're coming, pulling from you. So if you could make sure that your press release is very detailed and can give out as much information as possible, they're probably going to just take that information and run with it, and they won't bother you. The other kind of press that is generated today comes from them trolling social media sites. So they will start to see some comments on your community forums or whatever, complain about something, and then all of a sudden you're going to get a call and say, hey, how about that pothole on Main Street? What's going on with that? And so part of you has to be a little bit aware about what are the things that your constituents are complaining about on social media, so that either you could get ahead of it, or so as certainly that you're not blindsided by the press when they call you because of those comments.
Definitely a really good explanation of how things have changed, Laura. Laureen, did you want to jump in?
Sure. I made it my leadership thing to bring Facebook and Twitter or social media to the Public Works Department, and it required a lot of research. I set it up with no real comments from the public on ours. Ours is to push the information out, and I started with my statement of rumors are costly, get the facts, because if you read any social media, it's just everybody's an engineer, everybody's a driver, everybody knows better than everybody else. So if I can just put out, here's what happened, here's what's going on, it really helps in getting public support. We've had a couple of projects that were being slammed in the media, a new roundabout that we put in. And finally it went through. I-95 came out, they did a whole thing. We put out all sorts of releases, and all of a sudden, the next thing I know, all the comments were good. Everybody's going, oh, they're right, the traffic flow is great. So you just have to keep pushing that positive attitude, and the next thing you know, suddenly we're not the target anymore. They're off to somebody else.
That's always welcome. Sean, any other advice on social media? I think Laureen gave us some good suggestions.
Sure. So just in a previous life, I was the communications manager for the Framingham Department of Public Works, and I see my successors on here. So hi, Alyssa. But I think that department does a really great job of getting out there and getting photo and video of what your team does on a day-to-day basis. They do a really, really great job with snow removal and pavement patching and water sewer projects. We have a lot of I previously had a lot of multi-million-dollar construction projects that we were covering, and I feel like getting that connection point where people can see like tangibly what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, they then have that narrative in their head that they're like, oh, they're out there doing a lot of stuff. Like I saw that truck on Main Street the other day. So now like you feel like a little bit connected, even if you're not actively thinking about it, you're subconsciously exposed to this information on a regular basis. So you feel like you know them a little bit better. And then that leaves you in a position where you're less likely to criticize the work when you have a positive image in your head of what they're doing. And I treat social media. I mean, social media is, I don't treat it like a bulletin board. I don't push out one-way information. I do the interaction because the platforms are inherently built to be interactive. And so, but that's scary because you open yourself up to criticism, and that is very scary. So I do understand the hesitance there, but if people comment something and then you're able to educate them on something, and then preventing it to get to a point where it's at an argument, then that's the ideal place. But once it goes down that rabbit hole of being an argument, that's when you just disengage and you're not part of it anymore. So but it's getting that understanding of what that point is, and not getting too far down that rabbit hole. But I don't know if Lorraine, you want to add on to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, it really is a full-time job, and that's not my full-time job. But when you set it to private, we still get the comment and we can still interact. It's just the fact that the rest of the public can't see what's going back and forth. So you can answer their questions and you can direct, go here, go there. So it's not that you're not interacting with them. It's just not for everybody else to put their 2 cents in. I mean, I'd be happy to do the social media like you full time, but unfortunately I have to pay the bills around here.
And every now and then you hit a home run. I remember during a particular storm, when I was trolling the sites, I happened to see, that a tree was down, and, I got on the radio and said, does anybody know about this? Oh, I happened to be right around the corner. Public Works was there removing the tree so fast that the person got back on. Oh my God, they're here. It's gone. And every now and then you get to be the heroes.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of work for the city of Boston and for the MBTA, and as you can imagine, they're both frequent targets of social media. Some good, pretty often complaints. And one of the things, but these are institutions with large budgets, but one of the things we do on major projects is send out an email every Friday, tell people what we got done, tell people what's coming up next week. We're redoing the entire D branch. You're going to see these signal boxes going up. Well, what do new signal boxes mean? Well, the other ones were 40 years old. So, when these are in place, here's what's going to happen. Your ride will be a little quicker. You'll save a minute and a half each way, and you add that up for the week. So, there are lots of ways that you can show the value of the work that your agency is doing. But you're right, Lauren and John, it is a lot of work. It needs a lot of attention. And I'm
I would say
wondering
it doesn't need to be one person. So when I actually worked for a small transit agency, and it was just me as the planner. I wasn't the social media person, but what I did was I established relationships with other people who had connections in other parts of the community, whether they were part of this social media group over here, or they had just connections in. And I asked them, like, if you see anything mentioning our buses, can you just get it to me so that I have a chance to be proactive? Like, I will use your methods. And it's about partnering to get the word out. So I didn't have to be able to reach all 40,000 students on the campus and all of our riders at the same time. I just needed to get a few people to get it in. So use your resources, use your connections, because it doesn't have to be all on you to get it done. So
I agree with that.
True. And one of the things we do is go ahead, Sean.
Oh, no, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, one of the things we do is put a lot of community groups, advocacy groups on those email lists. And you're right, Catherine, they spread the word. Sometimes they don't like the word, but a lot of times they're sharing information about progress on the project, and that's really helpful. Yeah, Sean, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that we have a specific Lexington DBW page that I don't monitor. So I have a bunch of different social media managers in different departments, and that's not even my primary responsibility either. But we kind of support each other by keeping an eye out, like it was previously mentioned, that keeping an eye out and just letting each other know that something's coming up, so then you can head it off before it does become an issue. But it is having that joint effort, because it is a full-time job if you wanted to just manage it all by yourself, but you definitely need multiple social media managers, depending on the size of your community. If it's a much smaller community, that's a different story. But if it's a big community like ours, which is 35,000 people, that you're more likely to get more engagement there.
Yeah, definitely. We have a few minutes left, and I wonder if there are any questions that people wanted to ask or comments. I don't see anything right now in the chat.
And if someone wants to raise their hand, there's a raise your hand button, or actually, you know what? I'll allow anyone can unmute themselves at this time. So
Oh, magic.
you're allowed to jump in and ask whatever questions you have.
And don't tell me we've been so brilliant, there are no questions.
Actually, there's one thing I will bring up, just in terms of a lot of times at public hearings, and people are expecting things. And I think, in my experience, I think it's been important to, when you're at a public hearing, for example, on a project, to just let people understand that no one's going to walk out of the room and get everything they want, but explaining to them that you may not get everything you want, but this is a good project. And so I think that's always important, because everybody comes to a public hearing loaded for bear. I think it's important just to help them understand that, the project limited, not everyone's going to get everything, but at the end of the day, the goal here is that everybody walks out of the room saying, I didn't get everything I wanted, but this is a great project for the community. And I think education is very important, I think, when we're communicating with the public.
And you and I have been in a few public meetings and hearings together, Rich. One thing I do like to say to people, especially now when there's so much interest in conflict, is to say that, look, we can disagree with each other, but we don't have to be disagreeable. You can make your points and I can hear them and I can react to them. But it's important that we treat each other respectfully. That's really important. And I think, I can't remember who was, I think Laura was saying, the reasons why you can hang up, cursing, being yelling, things like that. Yeah, I don't let that happen in a public meeting either. Although it's a lot easier with Zoom. You can just, goodbye, you're gone, than it is when you have 150 people in a meeting. But anyway, we have all survived this far, so hope we'll keep going. Any other questions or comments people would like to make? Okay, no. All right, do any of our panelists want to have a quick closing statement or a little bit of advice?
Well, I just want to say thank you to all the public work professionals that are on the line today. Thank you for all you do for our communities, even if you don't often hear you need to know that you are very much appreciated.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you all. I think you did a great job. Good presentation and great kind words. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And I am putting the link for everyone. I know I did it in the beginning, but I'm putting the link to register for our April Chapter Connects event, which is recruiting and retention in the workforce. So be sure to sign up for that.
I think our time is up today. I want to thank our panel. You guys did a great job. Again, Regina just mentioned that our April 28th session, recruiting and retention, we hope you'll tune in for that. We had a great group today. We had over 100 participating. So that's all great. Again, want to thank our sponsors for helping us out. And just a reminder, if you miss any of our New England Chapter Connect sessions, they are on our New England Chapter website, newengland.apwa.net. Oftentimes we've had departments show some of these sessions during the lunch period for their crews and their staff. We had some pretty interesting sessions back in the winter operations during COVID. That was pretty popular. So you can tune into any of those. And again, thank you for joining us today. We'll see you on the 28th, hopefully. Have a great day.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.
Oh.
Thank you, panel.
Bye.